thanks for joining us for another edition of Mid-American Gardener. I'm your host, Tanisha Spain, and I'm joined today by three of our expert panelists who are going to teach you about all things gardening. So before we get in and answer your questions, let's have them introduce themselves and tell you where you can find them in the garden this spring. So Ella, we'll start with you.
I'm Ella Maxwell. I'm a horticulturist and also a master gardener in Tazewell County. And I have been out in the garden for the last couple of weeks with this wonderful weather. And of course, now I'm watching the weather kind of go up and down. But I enjoy all aspects of gardening, and I'll have a great show and share for what I've thought has looked really good in my garden this week.
Wonderful. Okay, Karen, where can we find you outside?
I'm in the central Illinois, Peoria area, and I'm a horticulturist, and I like perennials and shrubs. And I've been doing that end of the season, anything that's been kind of die back. I've been doing that final cutting now that we're past all the cold weather, hopefully, and just kind of that end cleanup of tidying up, ready for May.
Getting ready for everything to go in. Creating the nice space for them to go in. Wonderful. Okay, and we have a new face on the show today. So first of all, Ken, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been doing outside this spring.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm Ken Johnson. I'm a horticulture educator with the University of Illinois Extension. Our unit covers Calhoun, Cass, Greene, Morgan, and Scott counties. I'm located in Jacksonville, so that's west central Illinois, if you're not familiar with where that is. Right now in the garden, kind of like what Ella and Karen are doing, kind of doing some cleanup, enjoying the flowers and stuff after a long kind of dreary winter. So that's what I've been.
Wonderful. And tell us a little bit about what's your specialty? What do you find yourself doing?
So I'm kind of more of an insect person. So I enjoy insects, do a lot of stuff with pollinators, natural enemies, biological control, that type of stuff, or just insects in general. I also do stuff with fruit and vegetable crops, and I know enough about ornamentals to be dangerous.
Good deal. Okay. Well, once again, we want to say welcome and buckle up. Okay, so show and tells is always what we do first. So we'll go back up to Ella and Karen. Ella, what did you bring us? And tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, well, what I brought is a beautiful display, and I'm sorry my camera isn't so great, but these are actually the flowers from different epimediums. There's a couple different species. None of them, unfortunately, are really natives, but I'm kind of a plant collector, and so they can give you some really beautiful spring blooms. And then the foliage can be evergreen or semi-evergreen through the winter. Some of them are deciduous, but they can have some really large flowers. I'm always surprised with the variety and the color choices from white, cream, orange, yellow, and red. So this is Epimedium, and there I have several different species. And
now, is this a tree or a bush, or
no,
I missed that part?
Perennial, a little perennial.
Gotcha. Very pretty. I like those. Epimediums?
Yeah. Yes, epimediums. They're kind of a ground cover. They do have a underground rhizome, and they will spread slowly and colonize, and they're really good for dry shade.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. All right, Karen, what do you got?
Well, now that we're into May and it's the funnest time to go looking for plants and finding plants, I could probably talk all day about cannas and coral bells. I just, am obsessed about both. But this is a plant that I just recently got at a garden center. And even though it's in a pot and it's already growing and the weather's nice outside, I would still kind of take an acclimation period in your yard, in your area, because you don't know, has this been in a hot greenhouse, a cooler greenhouse? Has it already thinking it's June, but it's still May in your yard? So, letting it slowly get used to what the light is and what the temperatures are in your yard before you plant it in that final pot or plant it in the ground in your yard.
That's a good idea. I don't think we talk about that in terms of hardening off and getting them used to temperature when it's cold, but you brought up something that I don't think a lot of people really discuss is where the plant was before and what the conditions were like before. So is that something that we should be paying more attention to? Because I don't think I do. I think, oh, okay, the frost is out of the way, but you don't really think about acclimating for light and things like that. So is this something that we all should be doing before we put those plants in?
Well, it's just that the thing is, some plants are more tolerant than others. And then the other thing is, just about all the plants will take anything. It's just how long they kind of take to recover and settle in and then thrive, because you want them to thrive. And so, if they're sitting there unhappy for a couple of weeks, you're missing a little bit of time as that transition where you could have made it a little bit easier for the plant. So I mean, the end result, thank you, is the same for all the plants. It's just how long it took you to get to look better.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Good deal.
No, and the important thing that Karen is not telling you is that this is a Canova Canna, and it's a new brand that's been out for a couple of years now. Has several different flower colors and leaf colors too, but it's very compact. It won't get much taller than maybe 2.5, 3 feet with the flowers, where some cannas can get huge.
Mhm.
It's not that aggressive. It's great as a container plant in a pot as an accent, or again in the ground. And if you thought you didn't like cannas, try the Canova Canna and you'll love them. They are really nice.
Canova Canna, and we're going to talk more about those transplants and some best practices to give your plants a good start this spring. So, okay, thank you, ladies. Okay, we're going to move on to Ken. What did you bring us today?
So here I've got some cotton. So I grew some cotton last year in our garden. So every year with our garden, we try to grow something new. So last year was cotton and peanuts. And with this particular cotton, this was a red foliated cotton. So the leaves were kind of a maroon, real dark purple color. And these are related to hibiscus. So the flowers look very similar to that. And then, after they bloom and several months later, we end up with cotton here. Because they do like a lot warmer weather than we have here. And in most of Illinois, this is something you have to start inside and transplant outdoors. Kind of have to get a good head start, because this can be 150 plus days for some of this cotton before it's ready to harvest. Even though we started ours indoors last year, by the time we had our first frost, we probably would have had twice as much cotton if we had another couple weeks than what we got, but we just ran out of time.
So I have so many questions. When you're growing, I've heard it's a very thirsty crop too. Is that accurate? I mean, does it just take a lot of water to keep those growing?
Yeah, we didn't really water ours any extra, and we still got pretty good production. Granted, we're not doing it to sell. We're just doing it for the fun of it. So
yeah,
we could have gotten a little better yield off of it if we would have watered it more.
Now, when you harvest, do you harvest in the fall? I don't know if you said that part.
Yep. So yeah, basically when the bowls split open like this is when we would go out and pick it. It's ready to go. And then we'd have to go through, if we wanted to actually use this, the seeds are kind of inside here. So you have to go through and pick all those seeds out and that.
So did you end up having, a lot? Did you harvest a lot of cotton? And what do you plan to do, or what have you done with it? Or is it just for the kids to play with, as part of the experiment?
Yeah, so I've got 3 kids, so we usually let them pick what plants to grow, and our oldest picked cotton. So I think we had about 8 plants, and we bought a grocery bag worth of cotton off that, and it's just kind of sitting there with it. But
you can use it for crafts or something down the road. That's really neat, though. My boys, we did something similar. They grew loofahs last year, and so we've got this big pile of loofahs out in the garage that I don't know what I'm going to do with yet, but it was fun to grow, so neat. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, we've got some questions from folks that I'm going to throw out to you guys, and feel free to just jump in. Number 25, DJ, let's go to that one. It's about asparagus. Let's see, we've got a well-established asparagus bed that's at least 15 years old. It produces well, but we do struggle with, I should say, weed control. We use pre-emergence, and it doesn't seem to prevent the weeds from coming through. This is from Lynn Verdon. So, what do you guys suggest? And feel free to just jump in to help her with weeds around the asparagus. What do you think?
Well, I think really for the asparagus, again, you need to be able to identify the weeds that you're having problems with. The pre-emergent is really only going to work for the warm season annual weeds if it's applied early in the spring. And we've seen that there are winter annuals that can germinate in the garden, like the henbit and the mouse-eared chickweed and some different things like that that can be really problematic in the spring. So if you identify the weeds, you'll know, are they a perennial weed? Are they a winter annual? Are they a summer annual? And then maybe take better steps. I think the best thing with asparagus is in the fall during the cleanup, you might want to scrape off some of the soil and apply compost and maybe even some newspaper and some mulch that over the winter will break down. So in the spring, you're back with kind of a clean bed, and hopefully that might take care of taking off. It's the grass weeds that I think are the worst. And again, I'm not a proponent for herbicide applications. Maybe Ken could speak to that if there's a best time. I'm not sure.
Yes, you could use some herbicides. I would be, especially for like a homeowner, I would be doing it before that asparagus starts coming up, so you're not damaging that. And kind of with asparagus, the big thing is kind of that early season, get a handle on it, especially before that asparagus starts coming up. You can do some shallow cultivation and stuff. Just try to avoid damaging those asparagus, which is a little late for this year. And try to keep up with that throughout the season so that those weeds aren't going to seed and building up that seed bank in the soil.
But mulch, I think I heard you say mulch, Ella, in the fall, in the spring. Is it too late to mulch now? When should we be doing that?
No, I wouldn't think so. I'm sure they're going to be harvesting over this next month, and you could still put a nice layer, maybe up to 2 inches, if you're using clean straw, or even some type of wood chip, I think would probably be okay.
Okay, awesome. Okay, on to the next one, number 27, DJ. This is about square foot gardening. I would like to learn more about raised garden plots, maybe something in the square plots divided up. Is this called square foot gardens? So they're looking for, this is kind of twofold, I think, more definitions and techniques. So what are the positives? What are the benefits, I guess, of raised bed gardenings, guys? And feel free to jump in, anyone. Just if you were asked to give an elevator speech about raised beds, what would you tell somebody?
Well, Karen does have a small garden that's very productive. I have a large garden, so I think we'll let her tell her secrets to that.
Okay.
Well, I don't have a raised garden, but I think it's evaluating doing a raised gardening is finding what materials you want to raise it, and will it are you raising it to help access it, or
I think this question is specifically about space. How can I have a small garden and maximize my yield or the items that I can plant?
Well, and certainly if you've got a small space and you want the nicest soil, doing a raised garden, you're going to be adding soil and bought compost and topsoils and stuff like that to build up in that area. So it's very nice and loamy, and you're not going to be walking on it. Mm-hmm. So then that's important for the soil structure. But a lot of times when you say you don't have a lot of room, so it's looking at ways to go up, to use trellises, to plants that climb, or plants that sprawl, give them a cage so you have them go more straight up rather than sprawling out and taking up square footage going from side to side.
Great ideas. So it's kind of like harnessing, having those things and training them or being able to organize them well so you can fit more things in those smaller spaces. Ken, I think you were going to say something as well.
And just kind of some of the benefits to raised beds that, if you have poor soil, you have poor draining soils, you could build a raised bed and allow you to potentially garden in those areas. Typically, they're going to warm up a little bit earlier in the year because they are raised up. They kind of warm up sooner. So you can get a little bit of a jump start on the gardening season. And like they mentioned, you can add, you're kind of making your own soil in there. You're mixing your own stuff, so you can kind of control that a little better. It can get expensive to do that depending on the size. So just kind of keep that in mind.
In those smaller spaces, and this is something, Karen, you might be able to answer because Ella said you've got a smaller garden. Do you ever find it hard to get as much variety as you would like, or do you have it down to a system where you know exactly what you can grow in there? Do you ever feel like you don't have enough room?
Yes, I always feel like I don't have enough room. But then when I'm done cleaning up my yard and Ella still is in the deep trenches, barely eking out, a little spot, I'm like, yay, I have a small yard.
So it goes both ways, right?
Yeah. Yes. But I love homegrown tomatoes. So, that is my priority for giving space. And then, a few other things added in. So it's choosing your most priority of what you really, really want, or that getting that better quality from a homegrown fruit.
Right.
Or something.
And Karen's trying potatoes this year, right?
Yes.
In containers.
In containers. And then also I'm doing where I'd read somebody where they made kind of a cylinder in the garden out of chicken wire to then you're containing the foliage once again, not letting it sprawl all over. So we'll see.
Okay, you'll have to keep us posted on that because we've had a lot of questions come in with people saying, I want to grow my own food, but I don't have the room or I don't have a giant backyard or the time. And so, you might be the role model for the small space gardening there. One more question on companion planting. This is number 28. To derive the benefit from companion planting, do the roots need to share the container or can the individual containers just be placed next to each other? I really liked this question. I like the curiosity behind it. Ken, what would you say to this person?
I'll say there's kind of some misnomers about companion planting. So a lot of it's, if you plant this, it'll keep this pest away. And a lot of times that's not necessarily the case. One of the ones is Marigolds, is mentioned a lot. And those will work with some of the nematodes, which are like small microscopic kind of worms in the soil. But in order for that to work, it's the year after you till those into the ground and they'll start breaking down and releasing those chemicals. So a lot of times, the companion planting stuff you see probably isn't a lot of science based on that. A lot of times with companion planting, you're growing your plants, you think about the three sisters where you have your corn, your beans, and your squash. The idea with that is your corn is tall, so your beans can grow up on that. And then your squash, your pumpkins shade the ground and help retain that soil moisture. Is more kind of what the companion planting, you're using other plants to support each other. But even with the three sisters, they're going to be competing for nutrients and for water. And those beans will fix nitrogen, but you won't get that benefit till the following year. You don't get that current year.
Okay, so really it's about getting beyond those things that you were maybe taught or told and finding out if there actually is substance behind that, like the shading. And you mentioned, being able to climb. So those things are really real, but some of the stuff might just be kind of old wives' tales. Karen, Ella, anything there you want to add on companion planting or any do's or don'ts or anything that you would like to share?
Well, I think what's really valuable with the garden is rotating your planting areas if you can, and that becomes very limiting with small space gardens so that you're not building up any disease problems. And again, most of it comes down to good sanitation, mulching. I think mulching is very helpful, and then providing the support for the plants, making sure that they're evenly watered, fertilizing, all the things that optimizes the plant growth is really better than some thought of companion planting. So just become a better gardener and you'll have a better garden.
Ooh, we could put those on teeth. That's a slogan, I think. All right, we've got about 5, 6 minutes left, and I would like to just take this last few minutes just for some good discussion about transplants and when we move everything out to the garden, when we're putting our beds in, just some really good habits and things that we can do to give our plants and our transplants the absolute best start that we can. And I like that all of you have different backgrounds. So Ken, let's start with you. When we're moving things out, and I'm trying to think just from a pest perspective, what can we do to help minimize dealing with pests or dealing with mold or dealing with funguses? What are just some quick things that we can do in the garden? I don't know if it's a watering schedule or what, but what can we do to just have a good start, get off to a good start?
So I think the most important thing is making sure you're putting your plants in the proper site. So making sure they have the proper sun exposure. They're not sitting in, if there's something that does not like being in wet conditions, you don't put them in a low spot where water, if you have an area where water collects, you don't want to put a lot of different plants in that. So making sure you have that right location, or to make sure you're putting them out at the right time of year, not putting them out too early or too late. And that can kind of prevent a lot of problems right off the bat. And then, like mentioned earlier, that crop rotation, try not to grow stuff in that same spot year after year after year, because you can get disease and pest buildup in those areas. So I realize that's kind of hard with home gardens sometimes, especially if you have a smaller garden, but try to, especially with vegetables and some of these annual things, try to grow that as far away as possible as from where you've grown it in the past. And maybe you have to take a year or two off from growing something. If you grow tomatoes every year and you're starting to get a lot of disease issues in there, it may be best to just take the year off or grow them in pots instead of in the ground.
Okay. All right. Karen, what tips do you have?
Well, I would say, from working retail and seeing how people typically, if they're going to kill a plant, the main thing that kills a plant is either within the first couple of weeks they've had it or the winter. And so I think it's really, once you've actually planted it out in the yard, it's visiting it every couple of days, because just because it rained lightly the day before doesn't mean maybe it rained enough for that plant, or that it rained or when you put it in, the soil was really wet, but we've had really a hot couple windy days and that plant was in a soilless mix or a lighter mix, and it'll suck up where the roots are. It'll suck up that moisture really quickly, but the surrounding heavier soil will still be moist. So it needs to be lightly watered, not a good drenching, because the surrounding soil is still wet, but where the roots are is still dry. So it's that first couple weeks paying a little bit more close attention and following up and just looking at the plant to see how it's doing for watering.
All right, Ella, what about you?
Again, I think Ken said the right plant for the right place, and taking the time to really make sure that your soil is ready to go in the spring. You don't want to till when the soil is wet to maybe damage some of that soil structure. But you do need to have if you can make a good, well-drained soil, and that was one thing that at the property that I'm currently at, it was not new construction. It had original soil that is very loose and friable. So I am at a great advantage over new construction where it's heavy clay. So getting the soil ready to go. And I found that for most of my transplants, trees, shrubs, especially perennials, I'm going to actually remove some of that existing soil that it was grown in, because many of them are soilless bark mixes. And I'm going into a sand silt clay-based native soil. I'm going to actually maybe take a lot of that soil away and maybe not necessarily bare root the plant, but I want it to really acclimate into my soil and make sure that I get it watered in real well. So that has worked well for me, is to make sure that I have a good soil and that I have my roots, in contact with my native soil if I can.
All right. And last question, we've got about 2 minutes. I always like to talk about the pollinators. What can we do as we're outside? If you want to name, what are some flowers or seeds that we can pick up that will attract pollinators, that we can plant next to or near our vegetables, just to kind of be good stewards out there? Something quick and easy.
So some of the stuff I've put in my garden is cosmos. Those are pretty attractive. Allowing some of your herbs, when you plant those, allowing some of those with flower will be attractive to pollinators, as well as some of our natural enemies. So you can get into some of your companion planting that way, providing those floral resources for your pollinators, natural enemies that'll then move into your vegetable gardens and stuff.
Wonderful. All right, guys, we are out of time just like that. It goes so quick. Thank you guys so much for coming. Ken, welcome aboard the Crazy Train. We hope we'll have you on the show many more times. Karen and Ella, always a pleasure. And thank you so much for watching. We hope you learned something today. Please send us your questions. They love answering them. Send them to yourgarden@gmail.com, or you can also find us on Instagram or Facebook. Thank you again for watching, and please send those questions in so we can get those answered for you. Take care, and until next time, good night.